Civil War on the History Channel. Appomattox, Virginia, April 9, 1865. In the waning days of the Civil War, Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant negotiate the terms of the Confederate surrender. Keeping the record of the terms is Grant's right-hand man, Ely Parker, a high-ranking member of the Tonawanda Seneca Nation.
He actually drew up the Articles of Surrender under orders from General Grant that General Lee signed at Appomattox.
It takes several weeks for the news to reach Indian Territory, in what is now Oklahoma. There, Cherokee leader and Confederate Brigadier General Stand Watie reacts with disbelief. He knows little of the disasters the Confederates have been suffering in the Eastern Theater, which has been overrun by the returning armies of William Tecumseh Sherman. He has only seen successes of late along the Kansas border. Successes that owe much to the guerrilla skills of his Cherokee forces.
Although stellar battle victories, the war was in fact lost from under his feet.
It will be nearly 3 months after Lee's surrender that Watie finally lays down his arms. He will go down in history as the last Confederate general to surrender. But even then, he does so only after the government meets his terms.
Well, he's negotiating because the United States is prepared to negotiate.
Basically says we're having to put our arms down, but we have shown, despite the odds, that we are a fierce people and we will fight till we can't fight anymore.
Watie extracts a promise from the government that the property of the Cherokees, even those who fought for the Confederacy, will be protected from encroachment. But it is a promise that will never be kept.
In fact, they started losing more of their entitlements and were made to suffer even further by threat of losing their land.
The U.S. government now maintains that because Stand Watie and other Cherokees sided with the Confederacy, the land treaties they had negotiated before the war are null and void. The new agreements will be far less favorable.
By the time that the Treaty of 1866 was struck, there was one intent on the part of the United States to once again erode away and to diminish the power and stability of the Cherokee Nation.
Between 1889 and 1906, what had been Indian Territory is subjected to a series of land runs. 3 million acres of what will be the state of Oklahoma are open to white settlement. Stand Watie's old enemy John Ross dies in Washington in 1866, a chief in name only, in self-imposed exile from the Cherokee Nation. Stand Watie returns to his lands but suffers a series of financial and personal setbacks after the war.
Not only does he lose his wealth and his property, but his family as well. Sons are dead. His daughters only outlived him by 2 years. If not for extended family members and cousins, the line of Stand Watie would have relatively been eradicated within only a handful of years after the end of the Civil War.
Today, the opinion of the Cherokee remains divided over the actions of Watie's treaty party and the character of Watie himself.
Well, he was not only admired among people that followed him, but among the Confederate command. So he was recognized as being a great leader. There are his detractors too, because he was making war against his own people.
It would be asking today if Snoop Dogg were a hero. Depends on who you ask.
In the South, meanwhile, Henry Berry Lowry and the Lumbee Indians who helped guide Sherman's armies through the swamps remain outlaws to the whites.
The Confederate Home Guard basically transformed themselves into the Ku Klux Klan and just continued on with business as usual. In 1869, the governor of North Carolina put a bounty on the head of Henry Berry Lowry and his gang, but they continued to raid and were basically living legends in Robeson County.
It's a remarkable legend because he is a culture hero of the Lumbee people to this day.
Stand Watie, Henry Berry Lowry, Ely Parker. Though they were heralded by their tribes, the contributions of these warriors are quickly brushed aside by the whites. After the war, Native Americans are once again seen not as allies, but as obstacles in the way of progress.
The whites wanted their land, as they always had, so they were tricked into giving it up through various treaties, through bribery, or just through intimidation.
The moment of cooperation and opportunity has passed. Despite the valiant service of Native Americans to both sides, they receive little recognition. One exception comes in the last moments of the war, during the surrender at Appomattox, when Ulysses S. Grant formally introduces his staff to Robert E. Lee.
There's a large unknown quality to that surrender. We have the writings of General Porter, who was a very important figure at the surrender, and he says that General Lee was startled by the presence of Parker.
A legend has sprung up around the moment when Lee faced Ely Parker. When the Native American officer extended his hand, Lee is said to have hesitated, but quickly recovered.
Lee was kind of taken back by this because here's a man of color standing in front of him.
Then he recognized him as being Native American.
The exchange that was recorded next would provide an ironic postscript to what had once been called a white man's war.
He says, well, it's nice. He says, we've got a real American amongst us. And then Parker comes back as, well, we are all Americans.
The following program is a